So welcome everyone to our kickoff event for the 2020 Engineering Project of the Year Awards. Today, we are super excited to welcome back our large size company category winner from 2019, Alectra Utilities, to present this event, Leading the Charge with Alectra Drive at Work. It's a really, really cool electric vehicle charging innovation. And before I spoil anything, I want to it's going to be a great event. So just as any housekeeping items, just please mute your mics and turn off your webcam during the panel, the presentation, and please turn them back on during the Q&A and the networking session. And note that the webinar will be recorded. Since this is a virtual event on Zoom, but most of us live in the York region, so we want to acknowledge that we are individually living on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Mississauga Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So myself, I am Sharon Chen. I'll be one of your co-moderators for today. The other two volunteers who are Engineering Project of the Year Award Committee members are Reza Mahmoodipour, who will introduce the speakers, and Hazan Tavana, who will be moderating the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So some of you may be wondering, what exactly is Engineering Project of the Year? So the York chapter, we host an annual competition to recognize projects by licensed professional engineers that are excellent, innovative. We want to really recognize these projects and these organizations who have contributed to the community and to the profession by giving them awards. So this year, we're actually seeking applications for the Engineering Project of the Year Award and Engineering Research Project of the Year Awards. Any company with an operational presence in the GTA with a P.Eng, a professional licensed professional engineer in Ontario, overseeing the project is eligible. Provided there are more details on the website, but the application form is super easy to fill out. There's no fee to enter, and it's due January 20th, 2021. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at awards@poyork.com or go to the website. So if you have questions for the speakers, feel free to just jot them down, but only enter them at the end for the Q&A session. Without further ado, I want to give the floor over to Reza to introduce our two distinguished speakers for tonight. Reza?
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. And I have the responsibility to introduce our valuable speaker of tonight. I'm going to start with Manal Chowdhury, P.Eng. She holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Toronto. And she's a technical lead at Alectra's Green Energy and Technology Center. She has 6 years of experience in the renewable industry, such as wind and solar parks and battery storage sites across central and southern Ontario. Our other valuable speaker is Sara Ganowski, holds a master's degree in social and ecological sustainability and a joint honors bachelor of environmental studies and communication from the University of Waterloo. And she's a project lead at Alectra's Green Energy and Technology Center, managing various e-mobility pilot projects. So I'm going to leave the floor to our first speaker, Manal. Manal, please.
And Sarah, I believe you are sharing. I have stopped sharing.
I'm sharing, Sharon.
Okay.
Yeah, I will kick us off, actually. And are the slides up here for everyone to view?
Let us know if you can see it.
I don't see anything right now.
Okay. Sure.
Yes.
Oh, now
can
we
see
see it. Perfect.
Great. Okay, I'm going to mute myself.
Good.
Wonderful. Yes, I think that's it. Excellent. Okay. Good evening, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. We're very happy to be back to present our 2019 Engineering Project of the Year, Alectra Drive at Work. Things have changed a little bit in the world since Alectra delivered this presentation, so I really hope everyone's keeping safe and well as we're getting into the holiday season. As our very lovely introduction said, my name is Sara Ganowski. I'm the project lead on our Smart Cities team at the Great Center. So I currently lead our EV pilot projects and working on our EV customer strategy. And I'm joined by my colleague, Manal.
Hi, and I'm Manal Chowdhury, as Raza already introduced me. And I'm the technical lead at the Grid Innovation domain under the Great Center. And I do supervise a lot of the technical work that takes place across all of our projects. So on to you, Sarah.
So today we'd like to tell you a little bit more about Alectra's EV journey and our EV pilot projects, especially this workplace charging one that we deployed in Markham. We continue to learn from these initiatives every day, and we'd love to share some learnings with you. So to start off, for those of you who don't know us, we are the second largest municipally owned energy services company in North America. We've got over 1,600 employees, and we serve over 1 million customers in Ontario across 17 different communities. So we are in fact a amalgamation of 5 different utilities that came together in 2017. We recently acquired Guelph Hydro as well. So we've got quite a footprint in the Ontario utility space, and our business is organized into 2 subsidiaries. So we've got the utility, which is of course responsible for delivering electricity to our residents and our businesses, and our Alectra Energy Solutions and Services team, who does more of the fun stuff by providing innovative energy solutions like microgrids, energy storage, solar PV metering, and street lighting. So Manal and I actually are based out of the Great Center, which does fall under the utility. In 2019, we launched the Great Center as the company's kind of innovation hub. So you can think of us as that bridge between research and development and commercialization of emerging technologies. So we are currently organized around 3 different domains. The Smart Cities team, which is my team, currently looks at leveraging EVs and e-mobility to essentially power smarter cities. Manal's team, Grid Innovation, looks at grid modernization technologies with a special focus on DERs. And I'll just preface this that you guys are engineers, so you're used to acronyms, but we have a few of our own. And for those of you that don't know, DER stands for Distributed Energy Resources, like batteries and EVs and such. Finally, we've got our advanced planning team that do some really cool stuff. They look at transactive energy platforms and decentralized data governance, data analytics to prepare us for a more digitized utility future. So these domains are really centered around the key trends that we're seeing in the energy industry today. I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, have seen these before. Ultimately, the Great Center works to tackle each of these trends through our projects. And what these statistics really mean to show is that we are seeing a huge push toward a decentralized and more sustainable energy system in Ontario that allows customers more choice through smart and innovative technologies and data services. So we are really at the cusp of some exciting times, pandemic and all. I think these trends will continue to accelerate in the coming future. And that makes our job really fun. So let's talk EV. So EV is a key focus of ours across all domains actually at the moment. And that's because, as we know, the EV market is growing and maturing very quickly. And as a utility, we have a huge stake in EV adoption because the more of these vehicles that plug into our grid, the more we need to know how to manage and optimize those new loads for our customers' benefit and for the benefit of our infrastructure. So we currently have over 45,000 EVs in Ontario, which might be a shocking number to some because a lot of people still think that, you know, it's 10, 15 years from now, but we also have a third of that in our service territory. So we know it's coming and we are preparing for that future through our many initiatives. We're actually seeing that EV and fuel vehicle parity in terms of cost and performance even before 2025. So by 2030, it's expected that we'll see over 125 million EVs on the roads globally, which is astounding. And that kind of brings me to our EV journey. So that dates back to 2010, when we first identified EVs as a key opportunity for Alectra's smart grid strategy. In 2011, we purchased Canada's first electric Nissan Leafs, and we started playing around with them with different technologies and projects. So we hit the ground running with V2G demonstration projects, testing out level 3 public fast charging at our head office. We integrated these assets with different DERs like solar carports through our Alectra Drive Work project, which was also launched at our head office as well as Markham. And most recently, we launched a residential EV charging pilot, which I currently lead, that also looks to understand how EVs can be leveraged as demand response assets in order to better manage EV uptake on the grid. So at this point, I will hand it over to Manal to give you the scoop on our Alectra Drive Work project.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction and for really giving you guys more details on who we are, what we do as a team, and what Alectra does as a company. So now that you've learned a little bit more about our EV initiatives, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper on this particular project, Alectra Drive Work, specifically the one that we deployed at Markham Civic Centre. And so, you know, as soon as someone encounters a project like this, their first question to Sarah and I most of the time is, what is it? What does it do? And 90% of the time, our response is that this is a solution that allows workplaces to offer EV charging to its employees and be able to manage their energy costs at the same time. And then immediately the next question is, so what's so novel about this project? What's so groundbreaking about it? Well, in the next few slides, I kind of want to show you all of that. So stay tuned. But before I move on, I wanted to briefly mention NRCan and IESO for funding all of these initiatives for us, because without them, these projects that are either being deployed or are already deployed in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, they wouldn't have come into fruition. And of course, thank you to all of our vendors for making all of this possible for us. So moving on, one of our project objectives was why not just, you know, a hardware solution? Why didn't we just facilitate the installation of EVs at, you know, all of these sites and just be done with it? It could have, you know, as a utility, that's all we could have done and then leave it there. Why did we introduce a DERMS or a software as a solution platform? One of the primary reasons is that as soon as we look at the building load, which is for this workplace, 240 kilowatts, and then we introduce about 17 EV chargers into the scene, we add another additional 113 kilowatts of load, and that's almost 50% of the total building load. And when we do that, it almost like, it just leads into energy management. You have to do it in order to make sure that by introducing these services, you're not costing a company more money on their electricity bills. And so by introducing DERMS, we're not only saving and, you know, cost optimizing, we're also increasing asset connectivity, we're increasing visualization for all the assets and the DERs and the EV chargers that we install on site. And we also make it flexible and scalable so that, if the business owner happens to want to introduce more EV chargers into their parking lots or their properties, they can totally do that and still be able to manage it through that DERMS. If they wanted to introduce more generation, be it solar or PV or a backup generator, they can use that and then include it into ancillary services. But the whole idea of having a DERMS solution with EV chargers is so that, before COVID, we all used to go to work and most of the workforce stayed there for a long period of time. So it enables these businesses to offer their employers a way to charge their cars throughout the day and then be able to safely go home. And the other benefit is that businesses, unlike residents like us, they're not charged flat rates. And so they can take advantage of the on-peak, mid-peak, and off-peak hours, shift the loads accordingly, and get some cost savings that way. Some other project objectives that we had is, of course, stacking value. So if we, with this solution, we should be capable of participating in other market services, such as IESO's demand response program. But furthermore, we also wanted to validate the business model of this workplace charging and what makes it such a compelling offer and what kind of opportunities opportunity lies for the utility. But it also gives us an avenue to demonstrate and measure our performance and really understand the degree to which we can control and optimize our solutions. And what kind of features did we find more valuable versus which features didn't work for us as expected. And finally, we were able to analyze, so across different projects under the Alectra Drive Work, we had different vendors that we worked with. And so the other thing we were able to assess is whether these vendors are capable of not just working on different projects that we're currently piloting, but also if we were to scale up or commercialize, could we rely on these vendors to work on a solution? Moving on, I wanted to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of our system architecture. So in the middle over there, you see our DERMS system, which is the powerhouse and the brains of the operation. And this system runs basically 24/7 in the background. It uses machine learning that takes the historical data we collect from all of the assets that you see over here and better understand and predict when the building will have to optimize its power consumption, shift its load based on various inputs it receives. So going clockwise, you'll see that we receive price signals from the IESO. We feed into the weather forecast. We have the building automation system, which includes the site meter and the HVAC controllers. We have our EV management system, which feeds the driver's data, as well as the EVSE or the EV charger information. And then we have the battery energy storage, which works very well with EV chargers. So whenever we need to charge or discharge during peak periods, we can just offset the load using that battery. So moving on, one of the key aspects of the DERMS are the use cases that we run on the system. And we have 3 of them at the Markham Civic Centre. And the first one is tariff management. And this functionality basically interprets the day-ahead forecast from IESO. And it's 24 hours before. It breaks down the day between on-peak, mid-peak, and off-peak periods, and then shifts the EV and other high loads from high to low cost periods, especially during business hours. We also have the peak demand management feature, and this basically displaces the curtailment of all assets of the building. It dispatches the curtailment of all assets if the building load increases over the average load at a given time. So say, the building threshold level is at 250 kilowatts, that's the average load. And for an instance, during the on-peak period, the building spikes up to 270 kilowatt. The DERMS will curtail that 20 kilowatts to get the building load back down to 250 so that it doesn't have to pay the excess energy cost during that time. Finally, we have demand response, and this one I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It's basically dispatching 1-hour events during summer days when there are high peak loads on the system. And for that 1 hour, the system dispatches or curtails as many load as it can at a given time interval. And I just wanted to note that, you know, despite all of these functionalities or use cases running in the background, we do give priority to our customers. So if they have to charge their EV at a certain period that's earlier than the end of the business hour, they can completely do that. They can opt out and they can override and not participate in any of these services and you know, get their car charged and be on their way. So like Sarah said, you know, COVID has changed our lives and it certainly has affected the at work projects for sure. We have one at Derry Road, which is our legacy InterSource office. And then we also have one at the Markham Civic. So here I really wanted to show how EV consumption has been affected in light of the pandemic, but also how it's been affected when we introduced a charging fee. So the graph on the left shows a workplace where there are staff deemed essential. So, you know, the guys at the control room, the IT team, all of that are deemed essential. So they have been using the EV chargers at the Derry Road location, which is why you don't see much of a difference in the EV consumption as opposed to the left, where, you know, there was a dramatic decrease in the number of people charging, first because a fee was introduced and second because of the onset of COVID. In this slide, I wanted to show you guys a demonstration or a visualization rather of how a demand response event looks like. You know, before this project even surfaced, I always understood demand response to be, you know, very, very simple and straightforward. You know, you have X kilowatts of load, you know, a demand response signal is taken or received, it goes down to 0 and then comes back up to the X kilowatt of load. But that's really not the case, as you can see over here. As you can see over here, most of the critical loads are still running during a demand response event. The system tries to curtail as many non-critical loads as it can during that 1 hour duration, but it tries to curtail as close to 0, but it always, most of the time it can't. And so it tries to approach it. And then by the time the DR event is over, it goes back to its original load. So finally, all the projects that we try to initiate and spearhead at the Great Center, we try to, you know, obviously have the mandate of trying to make them as innovative and as smart as possible. But also we're also cognizant of the fact that we have to make these solutions eco-friendly and sustainable. And we know that transportation is one of the biggest GHG emitters of all time. Almost 30% of the GHG emissions comes from burning gasoline and diesel in vehicles. And we believe an EV solution like this would convince more people to switch over to EVs and potentially lead a more sustainable lifestyle. And one of the bigger goals of this project is definitely to promote more sustainable solutions, which reduces the stress on the environment and on the grid. So the graph below shows how the kilowatt hours consumed by each of these EV chargers, we only showed 11 over here as opposed to the 17 that are actually installed, how those 11 EV chargers correlates directly with how much GHG we save. And so at a monthly level, we can say we save about 2.75 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent for all the 11 chargers that are installed at each month, yep. And then at an even higher level estimate, throughout the duration of the project, we are able to say that we've saved, or we have reduced about 66.2 tons of GHG emissions by the end of 2019, right before COVID. And for, you know, equivalence's sake, that's about 13 combustion vehicles driven for almost a year. And that's about 1 home's energy use for a year as well. And now I'll pass it on to Sarah to talk about some of the interesting lessons and challenges we've learned throughout this project.
Our favorite. So I think our biggest lesson is that innovation is hard. It's really hard. And it's worth it, but you need to manage your expectations and trust that these new solutions that you develop will not just come out of a box fully baked. They take a significant amount of integration and development effort, research and analysis, coordinating with vendors. I would say that half our battle was just to bring together a team of solution providers from the industry to create a turnkey cohesive solution. And many of these vendors have never worked with each other. Their systems have never talked to each other. So I think that was about a year or two alone. And we learned when we started to hit the ground in terms of how the technologies interact with one another. Batteries and DERMS together are best. They communicate very well together. We also learned that different EVSEs, so charging stations, respond better to DERMS commands than others. So something to think about. Not all EV charging stations are the same in terms of software. EVs definitely have that curtailment capacity. We were successfully able to show how they can be leveraged as demand response assets. But something to keep in mind is that these batteries in EVs are still relatively small. So you do need a considerable amount of cars on site performing on the system in order to yield those material kW savings if you're doing a DR or PDM event. So naturally, fully electric EVs play nicely with these types of solutions versus hybrids. Again, hardware is important, but it's a software game. Software is our secret sauce at the Great Center. Software as a service definitely is the underlying kind of glue that holds everything together. We learned that EV drivers are certainly highly responsive to pricing. So in an ideal world, EV charging will be free for everybody all the time, but that won't be the case. And so part of this project was to test what that willingness to pay is. And we saw some changes in behavior, of course, as we put some different pricing mechanisms in place. One mantra that we follow at the Great Center is, build it and they will come. Once our participants saw that their workplaces offered these amenities, we started to see more signups. People were more inclined to switch to electric because, hey, I've got the infrastructure in place that will support that decision. And finally, we are very much dependent on policy drivers and market intervention for these types of solutions in order to go commercial. So we are still very much looking to the government to support clean energy initiatives and emissions targets through funding these types of projects. The challenges that inform these lessons, again, finding and researching vendors, working with local firms versus large international firms is night and day. And we do try and leverage Canadian local talent as much as we can in our projects. Contracting is always fun, especially when you have to think about things like IP and data, privacy, liabilities, insurance. Sounds like a bit of a headache, but you'll be happy to consider those as you're putting together solutions that have never been done before and haven't been gone through those legal processes in the past. So you're kind of checking the box that you're creating along the way. Manal and I will attest to this one, is testing and commissioning always takes 10 times longer than you think it will. And we learned that we need to plan strategically around that. So with EVs, no matter what the vendors will say, they don't play nice in snow and ice, and Canadian weather isn't always friendly when you're doing demand response events and you're sitting out in the cold plugging EVs in and out for a couple hours. And finally, DERMS technology is still in its infancy, along with the other solutions that we've used in this project. And that's something to keep in mind and manage your expectations. These are not fully baked solutions, but that's what innovation really is, right? So those are some of our key lessons learned. And I'll just round this out with a point on commercial viability. So it's very clear to see, if this were to scale up, what the benefits are for the different stakeholders involved. Obviously, for EV drivers, we're doubling their electric range, we're reducing their range anxiety, we're bringing them a cost-effective and convenient solution to fuel their car at work. For building owners and employers, this is a great way to demonstrate your commitment to sustainability, to build employee retention and morale. and to, of course, avoid electricity costs if you're managing those loads that you're integrating onto your site. From the utility aspect, of course, we're able to offer more choices to customers, explore new revenue streams, and meet our mandate of modernizing the grid. Just circling back to those 4Ds that I mentioned earlier. Finally, from a community aspect, the more projects you see like this pop up locally, the easier it will be for your community to really embrace EV adoption, to electrify fleets, and to introduce new local economic benefits as well. And I'll just end off here that, again, these projects are only made possible at the moment through the generous financial support from the IESO and NRCan, and we continue to look to our government to provide those energy mandates and policy drivers to support these projects in the future. Over to you, Manal.
Thanks, Sarah. So I want to echo Sarah's sentiments on a lot of the points she mentioned in the last slide. Especially in light of the impact that a project like this could have on York region. Just to add to it, of course, is that, you know, with a solution like this, obviously you need the financial support and the incentives to get it going. But that being said, it should, you know, pave the way towards making people more inclined to not just, you know, charge with, look at EV chargers and, you know, potentially think, oh, you know, I can buy an EV and not worry about having to lose charge at a workplace or something like that. But also, you know, incline them to buy an EV and move towards a more sustainable lifestyle. And of course, you know, businesses within the York region with a solution like this could also, you know, potentially benefit and consider a service or a behind the meter solution similar to this. And potentially, you know, it could be a new revenue stream and as well as a way to save on electricity. But of course, it would have to be somewhere in the long term, given that it's still pretty new. But yeah, I'm gonna conclude this presentation in the interest of time. Thank you everyone for your time to listening to us, and I'll open up the floor for questions.
Perfect.
Thank you, Manal and Sarah, for their wonderful presentation. Anybody want to ask question, please let me know. All right, I have a question in the chat.
Sorry, are you gonna read it out, Hassan?
I see Johan has raised his hand, Hassan.
Okay. Let's.
Hi, Manal. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the presentation. Congratulations again on the award. It's a really cool project. I just had a couple of questions, and I know these things, I've been working in the utility industry for a while, so anytime you try to do something new, it takes a lot of work, a lot of collaboration, and changing a lot of old processes that, you know, introducing a lot of new technology takes a lot of convincing sometimes. So just with this project, I was wondering, so with the solution, do you control the building load as well, or only the EVs that are connected? And then the second question was, so is this now like a division in Alectra that will manage these sites for the different customers that you have the these set up at?
I'll take the first one, Sarah.
Yep, I'll take the second.
All right. Hi, Johan. So the answer to your first question is that I'll go back to the slide where it's relevant. So we only read in the building load from the site meter so that we can kind of determine an average threshold levels for one of our use cases, which is PDM, peak demand management. But the other thing that we do control within the building is the HVAC controllers, just because there's such a huge load. It's almost 60 to 70% of the building's load. So we figured that if we could at least control, like, you know, 1 or 1 degree Celsius plus or minus, we could get quite a bit of load reduction whenever we need it during peak period. So those are the two main things we read, and only the controllers that HVAC controllers that we control. Sarah. I hope that answers your question, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
And Johan, you asked if we would have a division at Alectra to manage these projects. The Alectra Drive at Work project is a pilot program. So we have 3 separate sites that we're demonstrating this technology and solution at. And that includes the Markham Civic Centre, our head office in Mississauga, and another site in Mississauga being the Civic Library there. So these are pilot demonstration sites. However, we are going to move from offering these pilot services to commercial offerings, and that will be done through our affiliate, simply because we are a regulated utility and we're not currently able to offer these types of services commercially. So the idea is to demonstrate, pilot, build, assess, and then take our learnings to develop commercial scale offerings for our other arm of the business.
Cool.
Yeah, I do want to add to Sarah's response. We do manage the pilots that we currently do have under our belt. That part we do manage and operate, just if you were curious.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Next question. A question from the audience. Are the GHG saving net of electricity production GHs during the charging or average of electricity rates, GH rates?
So this one's a pretty I'll take that one, sorry. And this one is pretty much a simplistic calculation. So it's the latter, actually. It's just the kilowatt hour of the EV chargers, that's it. We didn't consider anything else in this calculation here. But typically when we do a full GHG evaluation and, we have to submit to NRCan, we look at things like, when we're using clean energy or, when we're dispatching the battery, like what kind of energy did it use to charge from. All of those factors play in when we do the overall GHG calculation, but the one shown here is just straight up from the EV chargers.
Essentially clean consumption.
Yeah.
If the audience doesn't have, may I ask a question? Although I am one of the facilitators. My question is, what are your personal biggest takeaways that you've learned from doing this project? Like it could be technical, non-technical, doesn't matter. Which one do you feel is the biggest lesson that you've learned from this project personally?
You want to start, Sarah?
Depends how honest I'm allowed to be. Sure, I'll take that one. So I think personally, as Johan mentioned and fully understands and appreciates the molasses that innovators need to swim through with these types of things. And I'm sure you guys see it on our faces, but my learning is, sometimes you have to, and this is going to sound corny, but do the change and be the change that you want to see, even though it's really difficult sometimes. And you are up against a lot of inertia from the industry and from how processes have been done for years. You just got to buckle down and kind of swim through it, because if you don't do it, then no one will.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like as an engineer, there is a degree of certainty when I was working in the microfit and fit projects that a lot of you are familiar with, and over there you can rely on codes and standards and all of that to kind of wade through some of the uncertainty, right? But here you're basically like nobody has done it before, so you can't really rely on anything or anyone or even the vendors, right? Like they'll only tell you how well their product works, but at the end of the day, we have to hike up and go out there and figure out, okay, is this going to integrate together? Is it going to work? And sometimes it doesn't. And, we have to figure out another way to do it. So
I also hear our VP's voice in our head, fail fast.
yeah.
So if it doesn't work, that's fine. Pivot and find something that does.
And last question from Joe. He thanks for your presentation, and he asked, is there incentive available for commercial building, adding EV charging station, or no?
Is the question if are there incentives for commercial buildings to add charging
EV
stations?
charging station, yeah, exactly.
So there's several. It depends really. So I mean, if you're looking to like if you're looking for a building certification, like your LEED certification, EV charging stations definitely help with that process. They can give you environmental credits for LEED and other green building certifications. In terms of like rebates or incentives from the utility, I mean, obviously, if you're a pilot participant, you take advantage of our like pilot rates and ability to provide a solution at a cost-effective rate for you. But Manal, are you aware of any other like commercial incentives for deploying EV?
Not that I'm aware of, unless you want to participate in a pilot, which I'm pretty sure we're at the end of our final run. I don't really think there's like a solution with an incentive behind it. But Sarah, I mean, we can definitely say that, this is something we're exploring at least more on the residential and MERBs end, right? That there could possibly be incentives on that side more just because of the volume rather than on the commercial side.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking right now at installing stations in multi-residential buildings, which typically face a barrier to this because of A, how expensive it is to get that infrastructure in there, and B, there's still a very low EV incidence in multi-res buildings. So that can technically be a commercial building. And if you have further questions about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about our current Alectra Drive at Home program from URBS.
Thank you for your presentation. I learned a lot from you guys, and thank you everybody for wonderful questions. I land floor to Sharon for next session of the program. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and Manal. I know I've definitely learned a lot more, even though I was there at the finalist presentations last year for your project. I think what resonated with me a lot is like really the challenges. It makes this innovation. It basically shows, as we all know, that innovation takes a lot of hard work. It's not just it just doesn't happen poof. It requires there's a lot of challenges that you had to overcome in order to create this such wonderful project. So thank you both for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. I will now move on to the closing remarks before our networking session. Okay, so as you can see, this year we are still holding the annual Engineering Project of the Year Awards competition. So if you want to be a winner, like Alectra Utilities was last year with the Alectra Drive Work project, please do apply. The application form is very easy to fill out, and it doesn't take more than a couple of hours. We would love your feedback. After this event, you'll be getting an email with a survey link. We would love if you could let us know what you thought of this event so that we can make future events even better for you all. Without further ado, due to the interest of time, we're going to move on to our speed networking session. So it's going to be 15 minutes, 5 people. Again, these are self-guided, and feel free to exchange LinkedIn profile links or anything. And just to break off the ice and start with the conversation, once you are in those breakout rooms, please try to answer, one, what was your biggest takeaway from this presentation? And if you could interview anyone, living, dead, or fictional, who would it be? So I'm going to split everyone into these groups now. Breakout rooms. Great. Okay. Open all rooms.